we're not going to use these, can I just take it off?
Okay.
अगर निकाल देंगे तो निकाल देंगे बढ़िया
Testing. An event if there weren't technical glitches.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session, Looking Beyond the School, Driving Family and Community Engagement. My name is Pradeep Kumar. I'm the Associate Director for Programs and Partnerships at Worldreader, and I'm very happy to be the moderator for this panel. Before I introduce my fellow panelists, let me just give you a context of today's session. We'll be discussing the crucial role of parents and communities in children learning, also the education system transformation, and recovery from learning loss. We'll explore lessons learned in various geographies, in various communities, also how to leverage the home and community learning environments to strengthen education access and delivery for children worldwide. We also have to keep in mind the context that we are living with. So there is like staggering learning loss which is happening. I have heard in other panels more than 1 billion children are out of school, and this is not by choice. Children are forced out of school. We also see that parents, because of no choice, they had to be the teachers at home. And there is an enhanced role of parents which everybody is now acknowledging. So in this entire context, we have today's session. And we are joined by an exciting panel of education experts from around the world. Let me introduce the panel first. So I have Daniela Martinez sitting with me here. She is the Program Officer Americas from the Global Fund for Children. Daniela supports grant management and organizational development for 17 Global Fund for Children grassroots partners in Central America. We also have Manushi Yadav joining us from India. She is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Pratham. She leads strategic partnerships for Pratham, working with funders, partners, and industry collaboratives to communicate Pratham's program and funding priorities. Welcome, Manushi. We also have Rebecca Winthrop joining us from the US. She is the Senior Fellow and Co-Director at the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. Her research focuses on education globally, with special mention to the skills young people need to thrive in work, life, and as constructive citizens. Dr. Winthrop works to promote quality and relevant education, including exploring how education innovations can leapfrog progress, particularly for the marginalized youth. To kick off the session, I have a question for each of our panelists here, and then we'll go up in the follow-up questions. The first question is largely to understand the community, the geography, and the kind of work that each organization is doing. And that is also with respect to the family engagement. So that's the key for this session. First question I have for Rebecca to start off the discussion. So Brookings has recently launched a playbook on family to school engagement. So Rebecca, please help us understand why and how is family school collaboration essential for education system transformation. Over to you, Rebecca.
Hi, thank you everybody. Nice to be able to join you today. We have been studying family engagement. I confess we started 3 years ago in an effort to really think about sort of the family, the community as a key element that might be somewhat overlooked to accelerate learning or accelerate a holistic education in our work on leapfrogging. But it took on a whole new life, as you can imagine, as you just said, Mandeep, because of COVID. And so we ended up having a big network, and we created this playbook with many other project collaborators, about 50 project collaborators across 10 countries, many of them jurisdiction leaders and their teams. And we surveyed 25,000 parents and 10,000 teachers and looked at lots of strategies and did a big literature review. And on your question about, what does family engagement do? One of the things we found is that it's really good at 4 main goals. And the first 2 are really about improving system. If you do it well, it can be really good at improving attendance completion. That's the first goal. And learning and development, really key for the COVID moment with learning loss. And that is really about optimizing the poorest / most marginalized, whichever are the kids in whichever community that are the most left behind. It's about optimizing their success in a given system with a given objective and not changing the objective of the system. And there's lots of studies to show that, again, if you do effective family engagement well, which means you have to have trusting relationships between schools and community members, it's the most cost-effective way of doing those 2 goals. There's been a really rigorous World Bank study that looked at that. We also see data from a range of contexts, including Global North contexts, that shows that schools with effective family engagement are 10 times more likely to improve learning outcomes of kids than schools without them. So that's all about improving education, the first 2 goals. But we also found that if you really do family engagement well, it can be really important for changing the purpose of what you want your education system to do. So that's the system transformation piece. We found it's really helpful in shifting the purpose of what skills and competencies young people, an education system want young people to develop, and shifting the purpose of the role of schools in society and really thinking about schools as a hub of learning and development for a whole community. And the reason it's so effective in this sort of redefining the purpose or vision of what a good education system looks like is because it's really hard to do reforms or big changes when communities, parents, families, and teachers, school administrators, education system leaders are not on the same page on what a good education looks like for their children in a given community. When that's not there, reforms don't go anywhere usually. So family engagement can really get that shared vision to help smooth the way for transformative work.
Thank you
Back
so
to you.
much, Rebecca. That was really helpful. I'll come back with a follow-up question later. Moving to Daniela, and specifically your work with the grassroots organizations. So can you help us, give us an example how working with grassroots organizations is really a key to ensure a meaningful family and community engagement?
Thank you, Pradeep, for that question. And I'd actually like to piggyback off what Rebecca was saying and reference an idea that I heard at the provocation masterclass session I attended earlier. I do agree that it's important to look at the education challenge as a systemic problem that requires holistic solutions. And as Rebecca mentioned, involving families and communities effectively is critical to ensuring children's access to education. And so that's why at Global Fund for Children, we partner with community-based groups that are driving forward local solutions to the challenges facing education in their communities. Throughout our, we are currently almost at the end of a 3-year initiative called Empowering Adolescent Girls in Central America that was supported by Dubai Cares. And we've worked with partners on the ground that are working with families and communities to garner support for adolescent girls' education. And, you know, we've got, over the past 3.5 years, I can think of many, many examples. But one particular example that comes to mind is one of the organizations that GFC partners with in Guatemala, Iniciativa de los Derechos de la Mujer, works in rural communities where indigenous adolescent girls face critical barriers to accessing education, including poverty, discrimination, they face social norms, violence. And so what the organization does is it engages communities and families from the beginning of the program. So they convene parents and local community leaders, say, you know, mayors, religious leaders, etc. And they drop a contract in which these local leaders and parents are committing to providing safe spaces for girls to be able to get together and do their programming, get involved in life skills. And so basically, you know, by obtaining this initial community buy-in before they even begin their programming, the organization is ensuring that parents and communities become champions for their daughters' education instead of being the ones that are pushing them towards early marriage, early pregnancy, you know, early labor even. So that's part of the reason why we believe that involving families and communities is crucial to overcoming these challenges to education.
Thanks, Daniela. And I think there are certain follow-up questions I can definitely see and various threads that we can, I think, would like to explore in the follow-up session. Let me move to Manushi from Pratham, joining us from India. So Manushi, Pratham has a long experience of working with parents, communities, and other stakeholders. So can you explain how the leveraging part with all these stakeholders and parents have been done? Also, certain challenges, if you can also highlight, and what are the key components that you see for a very effective community mobilization?
I think she's on mute.
Manushi,
Yeah,
if you can
can
unmute.
you hear me
Sure.
now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, I was saying a lot of components there to that question. I'll actually start with the first one. I mean, like you said, Pratham has been doing the work with communities. I mean, we started while working with communities in urban slums of Mumbai. And from there on, of course, the programs have grown to wherever we are today over the last 25 years. But I think working with communities has always been a key part of the work. What has changed over time is the role we expect community members, especially mothers and fathers, to play. I think initially, because a lot of our work was focused on getting children to school and ensuring that there is regular attendance, there was a lot of work that we did around mobilization. That's because we were working in almost like self-run early childhood centers in these slums. So the idea was that we mobilize parents and get them to send their child to this early childhood education center. Over time, as you would see, the enrollment numbers have grown, and that's what us has shown us year after year, that we do not have an issue of enrollment, at least in rural India. We've stopped looking at parents as just the folks who will get us access to children, and now we've started looking at them as a key part of the learning exercise and not just the getting them to school exercise. And there have been multiple studies. There was the RCT that talked about the Balsakhi program, where the idea was that you involve a young adolescent girl from the community and you help her actually work with children. But what we saw, how our approach has sort of changed over time is that we moved from a place of, a very ad hoc involvement to a very structured involvement over time of these groups. So linking the putting the usual standards of measurement that Pratham follows for learning, bringing them into the picture about mother's involvement, about parents' attendance and such, have become a key part of the work. And I would say that almost in a similar timeline that Rebecca mentioned, we transitioned from our usual learning camp model to a community-based model, which we were calling Hamara Gaon, which is our community or our village in Hindi. And the idea was that in order to bring sustainability, there are two ways to go about things. Either you do a system-led partnership, which is partner with the government, train the teachers, train the system to take, let's say, the flagship approach of TAL. The other way to bring in sustainability is to make sure that there is community level ownership, right? In case there is maybe lack of government buy-in today, or you want to position the community in a way that you are able to demonstrate the change and bring the government to adopt this model. So we said that we are going to stay in any community for a period of 3 years. We will work not just on children's education, but in sort of transforming this social structure that folks like us take for granted, but definitely is something that is missing. Even if you take care of the content, you take care of the instructor, but if you do not have the right social structure, this learning on your own and learning throughout life, I think that is a missing piece that children do not have access to. And that's what we were doing pre-COVID, and thankfully we were doing that pre-COVID, because the moment lockdowns were imposed, we actually had a network of mothers, of parents, of volunteers within the community who could take Pratham's work forward. So that's what we've been doing. I'm happy to come to challenges, but I would rather we don't start with challenges so early on. I think it's a very important topic.
Sure, we'll come back to that, Manushi. But thank you so much for highlighting these aspects and this critical aspect of like preparedness before COVID for a pandemic situation has really helped the organizations to meaningfully address this challenge. So I would like to take a moment here to build off what other panelists have said and share about Worldreader's work, how Worldreader engages the community and parents in our work. Worldreader is a digital reading organization, and we follow a framework called ABCD. A here is the access for books on any device, and we believe that technology should be an enabler. So if you have a very modest device at home, even that device should make you access our books. So access is critical. Second, B is for books for 0 to 12 years of ages. So we have categorized those books, leveling has been done, but books are there for 0 to 12 age group. And that brings me to C, which is the continuous engagement. And this is here where the family and community engagement really comes into play. So what we do for community and parents engagement, we send them regular reading tips, how to engage, how to do the storytelling at home. Also, there are certain reading activities attached with each book. So you tell the story, and after the storytelling session is done, there are certain very simple activities that you can do at home. Those are suggested to parents. Another aspect is some reading challenges that are organized on a regular basis to engage more and more parents and communities into our work. The last part is D, which is data. And we have a very robust system where we get key reading data in terms of how many books are read, how many pages are read, so which books are more popular. And this can be like segregated under various categories and variables. Uh, in the in the COVID time, when the COVID hit, we very quickly transitioned to support the families. In India, we used WhatsApp extensively, and for certain programs on a daily basis, for other programs on a weekly basis, we used to send the audio tapes, WhatsApp Creative, and also a deep link of the book, which parents can easily just click and they can read the desired book from the BookSmart app. In Egypt, we ran an 8-week long reading challenge, and through that challenge, we ensured very good community participation. And this weekly books were sent to their phones, and every week we observed reading and data spike in the reading data. In Kenya, we had the early childhood centers through which we engaged the parents and communities into their children's education. So that was in brief about the Worldreader and the work that we do with community organization. Let me turn back to the panelists again for some more questions. So Daniel, let me come to you first. Uh, like in your work, you shared about the grassroots level experience and also working with communities. Like we have this particular dilemma, you can say, where the digital skills for each child was felt a very clear need, but at the same time there were other pressing needs for the family. So how did you see that, and how do you like addressing this particular challenge?
Thank you for that question, Pradeep. Yes, I think I'd like to take a two-pronged approach to answering that question. I think something that is worth mentioning in this conversation is, what are the basic building blocks that need to be in place for parents and communities to be supportive of children's education? And I think that, it comes down to very basic parents being able to read and write in order to be able to support their children with their schoolwork, and parents, families having their basic needs met so that they're not being forced to push their children to either early marriage or labor, as the option that's on the table for having economic sustainability in the household. And so I think that, going a little bit back to what I was saying about the work that our grassroots partners do, grassroots partners are uniquely placed to understand what are some of those critical barriers facing families and communities. And so, they offer those sort of local, culturally appropriate solutions that, that take a more holistic approach. So they're not just looking at, how many girls have access to mobile phones and how many girls are tech savvy, but they're looking a little bit at the empowerment process that goes with, giving girls access to technology, giving children in general access to technology so that they can remain connected, so that they can advocate for their rights using these technological platforms. And so I think that, in short, I don't have an answer to your question. It's kind of like a chicken and egg scenario. What comes first? Digital skills that later lead to development, or basic needs met that later enable children to be able to hone their digital skills. I don't think we've got the answer to that, but what I can tell you is that grassroots partners are doing a little bit of both. They don't see it as black or white, either or. They really try to leverage the resources so that they can address the problem holistically. And so I think that, any initiative that hopes to have an impact in education and effectively address those challenges needs to have that holistic approach as well. And I think what Rebecca and Manushi have said, kind of bring back to that point.
Sure. And I think
Manushi, sorry.
the forums like Rewire Ed is like they are to help us to together, discuss these challenges and issues, and also then come up with the answers. Uh, Manushi, let me come back to you again and then ask about how Pratham wants to take these learnings from the COVID time, how you are taking those learnings forward, and also continue to integrate the school to community learning. So, what is the future path looks like for Pratham? You have to unmute.
I get too excited.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah. So, actually, I'll pick up from where Daniela left. Actually, just talking about this whole situation around. I mean, I won't just call it digital skills. I think a lot of it is just about access, right? For us, especially here in India. One of the things that we learned early on during the COVID period was that we cannot go with a pure, I would say, high-tech situation. So we started with just looking at WhatsApps, right? Just sending WhatsApps. And we saw that in terms of access that our communities had, states like Maharashtra had much higher penetration than, let's say, a state like Uttar Pradesh or Bihar. How do we then tackle this work? Do we just move forward with a subset of communities? That's of course not the option. So looking at low tech solutions for the time being until penetration improves was a crucial part. The biggest lesson that we learned was actually very early on. Again, what Daniela mentioned, you cannot just be the agent for education for a community. If you are looking at solutions anchored in community, you have to actually understand the larger context. You have to be available to them and sometimes change based on that context, or else they're not going to take you seriously because you are a fair weather friend. So we had to make sure that when we started these remote connections in March of 2020, we did not just start with education messages. We started with sharing information around COVID. We did not have great information around COVID across the country, especially in local languages. There were a bunch of myths. There were a bunch of misinformation. I mean, that's been a global challenge, but especially having the right kind of information, right kind of videos in local languages was a crucial thing. To be able to share that, we were able, by doing that, we were able to actually make friends in the community and people who would listen to us and would continue to be interested in receiving our messages. The second thing we did was, again, coming back to our social structure piece, we realized that if we look at the country and the kind of tech changes that we go through, I think community level assets has been a very, very common thing. There used to be just community level televisions where the entire community would gather and watch a cricket match. That's been a very common thing in India. Eventually, these things have changed, and now every household would have a TV, or every household would have a bike. But what is the situation with smartphones? When we looked at all our contacts and communities, we realized that every community did have some stable access. Does not mean every household had access. So we had to start viewing this as not a one-to-one approach, but a one-to-many approach. So we started developing out of a bunch of like 30,000, like the 50,000 volunteers, we realized 25,000 have smartphone access, and let them be an anchor volunteer. Let's pay for their data. Let's train them to a certain extent on community mobilization and engagement skill, because until Pratham staff has access to the community, these people are going to be our ground staff. And that was not just limited to youth, that was young mothers. We have about 100,000 mothers across 10,000 communities in the country, out of which, let's say, around 20 to 30,000 have smartphones. We've created groups of mothers in these communities, and the mother who has the smartphone is the smart mother, because she has a smartphone. And she is the one holding the group together and is the one who makes sure that even if the household doesn't have a smartphone, the child still has access during a few hours a day to the material that Pratham is sharing. So leveraging a bunch of solutions at the ground level, building on the context in which these communities have lived and the sense of community that already exists, and putting your solution on top of those networks has been a very good thing. In certain states, self-help groups and mothers who are a part of these self-help groups have been our biggest anchors in these communities because they're already organized. You are just requesting them to give some of their time to their children's education, which is not something they are opposed to at all. So that's been one of the biggest learnings here. Going forward, I think there has to be an understanding that there is no going back to the 2019 model. We will have to move in an organic way, bring some of the normal pieces back while continuing to work off of the foundation that we've been able to layer in the last 2 years. So making sure that these community groups, these mother groups are strongly linked to school system, and there is no us versus them situation. This is a big challenge in India. There's a lot of blame situation that happens where school thinks that the parents aren't doing enough and vice versa. Ensuring that getting children back to school as schools are reopening, ensuring that they stay in school, and advocating for foundational literacy and catch up is something that is owned by communities, is a very essential part of any kind of reopening that we're looking at. So making, we said that, going back to school should be a cause for celebration. It is these mothers groups who've anchored these small celebrations in the communities, keeping in mind all COVID protocols, but ensuring that, children are going back to school after a 2-year period. It is a big thing. Ensuring that they continue to go back, ensuring that someone in the community takes ownership for tracking where the children are going back. And if someone's not going back, going to their household and having a conversation. Because it is happening by folks within the community, it's not seen as an external pressure, as an evaluation, as anything, it's not externalized. It's just community taking ownership and taking that forward. And this has sort of increased the community's almost like bargaining power inside the school system. Right? Sure. Making sure that within the school management committee, which is something that we have on paper here, and we do have an existence in all villages, but not really active in most cases beyond budgetary allocations, we've seen that as the community's role in SMCs has grown, we are able to actually have a richer dialogue between school and the community setting. And I think going forward, we are saying that there are 4 key pillars of our work. There is work that's happening inside the house, home. There is work in your immediate neighborhood, which is what this group is facilitating. Then there is the larger community, and then there is school system. All these 4 pillars kind of have to always be aware of what's happening where, because we may have sporadic lockdowns, we may have localized lockdowns with outbreaks and such. We can't be in a situation that we were in 2020 where parents were not involved or community was not involved, so there was a complete and sudden halt. We cannot afford another complete halt.
Sure.
So that's essentially what we're looking at.
Yeah. Yep. Thank you so much, Manushi. And of course, we need like a lot of resources for parents, and they're enabling them with a lot of tools. Let me go back to Rebecca and then ask some more details about the actionable tools in the Brookings playbook. How can people use this playbook and also build the homeschool connections? Rebecca, if you can explain those.
Yes, sure, absolutely. And before I start listing the tools, I just want to build off what Manushi was talking about, and some of your examples too, Pradeep, as well as Daniela's. And all of you have mentioned a little bit, and I think there's this undercurrent, and we found it very much in our research, that one of the challenges is that low-income parents or non-literate parents or rural parents, whatever it may be, it's hard for them to engage. You hear that a lot with school leaders, teachers, etc. And sometimes people think, and there is this narrative out there, and I want to dispel it because we talked to 25,000 parents across a wide variety of socioeconomic demographics across many contexts and countries, and we didn't find it existing at all. There is this narrative out there that, low-income parents are really, they're way too busy. They don't really want to engage, and they don't really care about their kids' education. What they want is getting their kids to go to school to get a job. And we didn't find that to be the case at all. In our research, they do want to engage. Every parent wants to engage. They don't want to become a teacher, so COVID wasn't super fun. They want to be an ally, and they want to be a support. And the minute that schools switch their approach from bringing parents to the school and bring the school to parents, much in the way Manushi was just talking about. You can see family engagement go off the roof. One of our project collaborators in our family engagement network was with Himachal Pradesh in India, the Ministry of Education and their partners there, and they went from 20% family engagement pre-COVID, and they did a big hustle when COVID happened and started bringing the school to families and parents exactly like Manushi was talking about. They went every way: texts and smartphones, materials, Facebook, WhatsApp messages, e-parent teacher meetings, just trying to reach parents, and engagement went from 20% to 80% in 2 months. And so that really just shows that parents do want to support, and they can. And I totally agree with Daniela that it is much better, and maybe schools could be a source of literacy training for parents. It's much better if they're literate, but they don't have to be. Pratham has some great examples of in COVID texting families whose parents were not literate, a voice message saying, can you have your young child, count the number of teeth in every adult's, house member in the household, and they could listen to it. The kid did it. Good numeracy practice, fun. Tell me and write, voice message back. So there's lots of ways to engage parents wherever they're at. And that's one of the reasons we have put so many tools in our playbook. And the tools are really not for parents directly. They're probably for all of the folks like you guys in the audience. They're for nonprofit leaders, government leaders, funders, etc., school leaders. And I want to just highlight quickly sort of 4 main things you can go in, find on the website. It's all at brookings.edu on the website. And one is a strategy landscape, where we've really seen all the different levers during COVID and before COVID that have been used for effective family school engagement. And you can take that, it's like a conceptual framework, and you can do a little audit of your programs. You can say, am I using all the levers? Am I using all the spaces and places that have been effective for other people around the world? The second thing you can do is go into our strategy finder, which it houses, against all those components in the strategy landscape, lots of case studies, examples of what people have done during COVID. So they're promising examples, but also effective, proven examples before COVID on how people are doing things differently, get some inspiration, learn how they did it, what went wrong, resources. So the strategy finder is a searchable database on the website. And we do have a big PDF with all the case studies and the key insights to download if people don't have access to searchable databases in their communities or networks. And the third thing that we have is something called a conversation starter tool. This is really to start building that, as I like Manushi's idea of developing friendships. It's really about relationships. That is the key. Actually, if you talked about sort of ingredients, it's absolutely key: trusting relationships. So this conversation starter tool is really a beginning of a relationship builder, and ask parents. On the one hand, you could deploy it for students, teachers, school administrators. You ask them separately, what does a good quality education look like for your kids? What do you want out of your school? Surprisingly, most parents in our survey said they wanted social emotional development, and then some academics. And only parents of older children said they wanted their kids to go to school so they could get a job, not poor parents. So it's questions like that, and people, you answer for each group, and then you come together and you share your responses. And we did find that parents and teachers had very different responses. They weren't really on the same page. And the idea is to just have an open dialogue, bring parents to the same table with teachers, with school leaders. Certainly you could do it with students, and start that conversation about what kind of at school do we want for our kids. You could do it at school level. You could do it across your schools in a jurisdiction or a network or a nonprofit. And we are piloting and testing it out. So let us know if you do try it. We'd love to hear how it goes. And the fourth thing, if anybody wants any more in-depth sort of orientation, review, materials, we have a whole training workshop that does have a certificate with it, especially school leaders find that helpful around the world because they need it for some professional development points. We have a guided workshop program, and people should feel free to contact us at leapfrogging@brookings.edu to get those materials.
Pradeep,
Sure.
I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. May I follow up with just a very quick
Please go ahead. Yeah.
comment? Because I'm really fascinated by what Rebecca
Please
was
go ahead.
saying.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's information like this that I think needs to get shared. I think that, conferences like these can sometimes feel very overwhelming, lots of new information coming in. But I think that, all of these new things that we're experiencing, not just because of COVID-19, but also, just in general, innovation in education, learning through play, community-led initiatives, getting community and parent buy-in to support children's education. I think that, at the end, it's important to talk about what's working and what doesn't, and that can sort of lay the groundwork for, how do we need to innovate our school system precisely to respond to what parents and communities need to support their children's education. I completely agree with what Rebecca was saying. Just because a parent cannot read or write doesn't mean they're not eager to help their child succeed in school. But then what does that parent need? If school is saying, well, you need to help your child read their work, maybe the school needs to be thinking about new things that they can be sending to their parents, to their children's houses, so that parents become involved. And I think that, so far I've seen some really interesting ideas about learning through play and different, the toolkit that Rebecca was talking about. So yeah, I think that, that's an interesting way of bringing these points together.
Definitely. And see, our experience also, Worldreader has recently did a community focus group discussions, and this passion and desire to support their children's learning is like expressed by each and every parent. But what they share that, okay, where they need support is some kind of practical and simple tools, if those can be shared with them. And also they shared that they felt a psychology of shame and lack of confidence. So I just want a quick, like one minute kind of a reflection by each one of you, how to build the confidence and skills in parents to overcome this lack of confidence, and then this psychology of shame. So let me start, Daniela, with you.
Okay. I think that it's crucial to empower local actors to respond to these challenges in their own way. I think allowing them to shape what success looks like for them, and kind of thinking of more creative, less traditional ways of measuring what success looks like. Maybe not so much in terms of numbers, but in terms of the process. How is the process empowering children and adolescents and youth to become actors in their development? How is the process empowering families to support their kids? I think all of that is crucial to making families feel more confident about the role that they can play in their children's education.
Definitely. Manushi, your quick 1 minute reflection on that.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think looking at local connections already and sort of building upon that, as opposed to treating it as something wholly external and completely new. Because whenever we've spoken to mothers who are in their self-help groups meetings and all, they're very empowered. They do not shy away from saying what they want to say, even if it is to say, why are you sending this stupid material? This seems very simple. Why can't we have something actually a little more complicated for our children? So I think leveraging their local expertise and making them understand that they have the right to ask questions, and especially with young mothers, especially with leapfrogging, keeping that in mind that these young mothers were fairly recently adolescent girls themselves, right? They do need like a social structure for themselves to operate in. So making sure that when you are engaging mothers, you're not looking at them as just means to an end. you are sort of looking at them as a group in itself, and they also need some access to whether it's digital literacy, financial literacy. So the whole education for education component that we are trying to look into, that can we empower our mothers, can we empower our volunteers through learning for life, learning for school, or learning for work, or maybe a combination of all three. Can we do that so they can take this work forward?
Sure.
I think that's something that we're looking at.
Yeah. Thanks, Manushi. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Pradeep. I think I've said it before, but from the research and from the evidence, the number one thing that helps overcome that sort of sense of I don't belong in a school, it's intimidating to me, I don't speak the language, I'm not literate. And there's many reasons that families would feel that way, particularly marginalized families. So schools have a lot of work to do, but the number one thing that from the evidence shows that overcomes that is this idea of building relational trust. And this concept of relational trust is measurable, it's out there, it's studied, and you can't have trust if a teacher is looking down on a mother. You can't have trust if a school is sending information and instructions in a language that a family doesn't speak. You can't have trust if when parents come to the school building and they don't quite know how to navigate, they're scoffed at or made to feel out of place. So I think that if the one thing that people should do is really dig into that. We do talk a lot about it in the Brookings playbook, but there's a lot there, we pull on lots of other sources for it.
Perfect.
That's my suggestion.
So, yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And we are almost at the end of this session. We have time for just one liner, and that's my last question. So if I ask you, based on your research and project learnings, what is one single component that you would like to highlight that makes a successful school-community relationship? Just one liner. Yeah, starting from Rebecca with you, and then Manushi, and then Daniela.
I think I'm going to be a broken record. I think I answered that question just now. I'll leave my relational trust. I'll leave it to Manushi and Daniela to add.
Yeah, I mean, I also don't think I can add on to anything that I've said so far. Yeah, I completely blanking out on this. Sorry about this.
No problem. I think there are many things that you have already shared. Yeah, Daniela, just to pinpoint one.
Oh man. Well, I think that what I'd like to highlight something that Rebecca said actually is because that's also at the heart of our model is not looking at families, at children, at communities as a means to an end, but also looking at the importance of the process, not focusing so much on the final metrics and how much did we achieve, but just understanding that through this process you can also achieve a lot, and that it's hard, it's gritty, it's difficult to measure, but it's worth the effort if you really want to achieve long-term sustainable change in education.
Sure.
So
Thank you so much,
message.
Daniela, Manushi, and Rebecca. Appreciate all the learning and insights that were shared. I thank your virtual and physical presence for this session. And I think the audience, I should thank all the audience here for their patience and their joining the session. Now, the final word, I think, which all of us are sharing, that no rewiring of education is possible without taking into consideration the role of parents and the enhanced role of parents that the pandemic has taught us. So with these words, I thank you all for your joining the session. Thank you so much.